Welcome to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. It's wealth medicine for doctors. If you're a doctor and you have no time, it looks like you found us just in time. This podcast is for all doctors who would like to work on their personal wealth, but do not have traditional hours to do so because they have no time. We're here to jump into topics that will help you address your wealth both inside and outside of your practice so that you can live the life of significance you're dreaming of. You'll hear from your peers, you'll hear from industry professionals, and your host and wealth advisor, me, Kevin Sullivan. This is your time. Now let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to Physician Wealth Meds, a wealth podcast for doctors. I'm your wealth advisor and host, Kevin Sullivan. This podcast goes out to over 4,000 doctors of different specialties, and it's my goal to provide relevant content through this podcast and to help you build wealth both inside and outside of your practice that will last for generations. However, what is good about having wealth if it's not protected in the right way? And this is why I've asked attorney Blak Harris to join me on this podcast today to discuss asset protection. So welcome, Blak. I appreciate you joining us today.
Kevin, thanks for having me. Nothing I enjoy more discussing than asset protection.
Thank you so much for joining us again today. I'll just read a little bio that we talked about this on your website. Blak Harris is the founding principal at Blak Harris Law, where he assists clients throughout the world with offshore asset protection. He's traveled to over 40 countries, and Blak has built an extensive global network by meeting with trust companies, protectors, and bankers worldwide. An accomplished author as well, an international speaker, Blak has educated countless professionals through his continuing legal education lectures on asset protection and offshore planning. He's been quoted in numerous publications, including Bloomberg, Forbes, the Epoch Times, of course, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, and MarketWatch. And beyond these accolades, he boasts of a significant social media presence with over hundreds of thousands of followers, further solidifying his influence in the field. With a seasoned background in wealth management, Blak Harris previously worked at one of America's premier wealth management firms, advising high and ultra-high net worth clients on strategies to safeguard their assets. His passion for helping families preserve their legacy inspired him to establish Blak Harris Law, a firm deeply committed to providing tailored solutions and peace of mind for its clients. Tell us about asset protection and what it is and why it's so important and how it works and why it's relevant for doctors. And maybe start us out with who you are and how you became to do what you've done, and then we'll just start the conversation that way.
My name is Blak Harris. I'm the managing attorney at the nation's largest exclusively offshore asset protection law firm. I help my clients develop structures which keep their assets protected from lawsuits and divorce. I've had my law firm for over 10 years. For the past few years, I'm pretty sure my law firm has set up more offshore trusts, at least in the Cook Islands, than any other law firm in the world. As of the recording of this video, we've never once lost a penny for a client. Lawsuits are common. The United States, by many standards, is the world's most litigious society, with thousands of lawsuits being filed every single day, billions of dollars being ordered to be paid out in judgments every few days. If you want to be successful in the United States, or I should say, if you are successful in the United States, at some point you will be sued. It's simply a badge of success. And the best thing you can do to beat a lawsuit is to avoid it entirely. And the way you do that is by making yourself uncollectible. And that's exactly what we do. We set up structures that allow our clients access to their money. They can still invest it. They can still take distributions. But if somebody brings a lawsuit against them or gets a judgment against them, nobody's going to be able to collect from one of our clients.
That's a great opener. So that is really solidifying it so that there is no question assets are protected. And as of this recording here, you haven't had any client lose money.
Correct.
That's a fantastic track record. So tell us about asset protection. What are the gears associated with that, and how does that work?
So there's lots of different strategies for protecting your assets. You've heard of LLCs, you've heard of insurance, you may have heard of domestic or offshore trust. Each one of these has a component in an overall asset protection plan, or at least most of them do, starting with first level insurance. I recommend my clients purchase insurance, buy as much homeowners car insurance as your agent will sell you. Get malpractice insurance, life insurance, anything that can go wrong. If they sell you insurance, usually I recommend buying it. However, I don't recommend relying on insurance because many claims will go beyond policy limits. Some claims will not be covered, and it's not unusual for insurance companies to try to escape paying some of the bigger catastrophic claims. For the smaller ones, insurance companies want to protect their reputation, pay it out. But if there's a catastrophic claim, $1 million, $2 million judgment comes out, it's not atypical for insurance companies to try to avoid paying those. So step one, get insurance. Next, if you have any real estate that is not your primary home, we recommend putting that into an LLC, or if you're operating a business and it's not already incorporated, put it into an LLC structure or perhaps a C Corp or an S Corp. Doing this doesn't necessarily protect the asset from being taken if you get sued personally. What it does instead is protect you from being sued because of the asset. Running a business or owning real estate is inherently risky. And if somebody brings a lawsuit, gets a judgment against you, then they're going to be able to take that business or take that real estate from you, whether you own it directly or through an LLC, with certain exceptions. Maybe if it's a multi-member LLC, you could have some charging order protection there, but even that could be compromised. However, if somebody slips and falls on a piece of real estate, or somebody injures themselves or sues you because of your business, that LLC can serve as a protective layer, protecting you from being sued because of that. So next step after insurance, form an LLC to minimize the liability associated with owning certain assets such as real estate or business. And then the next step is where the real protection comes in, the real power, and that's putting your various assets, whether it's the LLC that owns your business or an LLC that owns a piece of real estate, or simply a bank account, which inherently doesn't have much liability associated with it. It's just a very juicy asset for someone to take, putting that all under the umbrella of an asset protection trust. Now, in the world of asset protection, there are basically two types of trust available. One of those is a domestic trust, and then one of those is a offshore trust. Anything in between is actually just going to either, in reality, be either a domestic trust or an offshore trust. The benefit of the domestic trust is that it's probably going to cost you less than the offshore trust. It's also not going to require you to use a foreign trustee, and you can avoid certain IRS and FinCEN reporting requirements. The downside to the domestic trust is that it can be disregarded by a U.S. court. Under Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution, the full faith and credit clause, every court has to give credence, has to recognize the court orders from other places. So if you have created a trust, let's say Nevada, but somebody gets a judgment against you in California, New York, Florida, or Texas, those local courts may not recognize the trust from Nevada and allow the trust to be pierced. And this has happened many times, and there's lots of case law about how domestic trusts have been compromised. So the alternative to a domestic trust is to set up an offshore trust. And this is where my firm focuses our efforts for multiple reasons, but the main reason being that we want to give our clients the best protection. In terms of working with a foreign trustee, it's not an issue because we have very close relationships with many of our offshore partners that allow us a lot of confidence and peace of mind, knowing that they will keep the assets protected and safe, and that we can rely on them to take care of client matters quickly, timely, and cost effectively. On top of that, as far as the IRS reporting requirements are concerned, they're going to cost $2,000 to $3,000 typically. And if our clients are setting up an asset protection trust, generally their net worth is over $1 million. It's not going to be any big fee for them. Plus, as far as the paperwork is concerned, it's not really the clients who are preparing that paperwork themselves. They've got a CPA that signs off, that prepares the paperwork, and the clients simply have to sign off on it. So when you weigh the pros and cons of the offshore versus the domestic trust, our theory is this. Yes, the domestic trust is going to cost you a little bit more to set up, a little bit more to maintain, but you're going to recoup that cost many times over in the event that you get sued, because the protection is so much stronger with an offshore trust than it is with a domestic trust. And that's where you get the real value. That's why I say the better value long-term is always setting up the offshore trust. Now, you probably have a few questions about an offshore trust. I'll stop for a moment and let you steer the conversation from here.
No, that's fantastic. What a great opener. I was just thinking, as you were saying, I got many questions going through my mind, but one of them was, I'm sure you help them get from point A to point B. Like once you set it up, you help them fund it and move the assets into the trust. And there's a nightmare scenario. That's the reason why I said that. I used to work for Bank of America as an advisor there in the bank system before I opened up my practice back in 2007. But we were sitting there. This is a true story where we had to explain to the children and to the grandchildren that mom and dad never funded their trust. And that was just a domestic trust. And there was literally weeping at the conference table. And it's one of those times that sticks out in your mind out of all the years you do things, you know, that this poor family, if they had the trust, and I've always called it like a house with no furniture in it. You got to put the furniture in the house and fund the trust. And it was one of those stories that I'll never forget. But do you have a story like that where someone started to do this and messed it up?
So the lack of funding is an issue when somebody creates a trust. And I see this more often with domestic estate planning trust. Yeah. Mom and dad set it up and maybe their estate planning attorney didn't tell them or didn't follow up or wasn't very clear on the instructions that you need to properly fund your revocable trust. Otherwise, your assets are going to end up in probate. I see this happening less often with the offshore trust because it is more of a urgent matter. Estate planning clients tend to drag their feet and put things off. Quite frankly, it's something that just needs to get done before they die or become incapacitated, and who knows when that could be. With asset protection, clients are a little bit more motivated because they want to get this done before they get sued. If you don't get your estate plan trust done, well, that's really a problem for your family. But if you don't get your own assets protected, that is really your issue because it's going to cause you to lose your own assets. So with that, we don't have such an issue, but the important thing is to make sure that you are working with an attorney who has well-established relationships for getting the trust opened and getting the assets moved in, which include relationships with our international banking partners. And it's the reason that I spend a lot of my time traveling to countries like Switzerland and Cook Islands and Liechtenstein and building and maintaining these relationships so that not only are the clients able to get the accounts opened, but that we can get them open for lower minimums than some of the other people in the industry so that we can get the accounts open faster than anyone else or at least very, very fast. And that is really a big power of working with a firm that focuses just on offshore trust like that, like us, so that funding is not such a problem.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that physicians pride themselves on is how well they take care of their people and their patients. And they're able to look at you and say, this might be new to you, but I've done the same surgery 20,000 times over in the last 10 years. But a lot of the physicians that listen to this podcast own their own practices. So are physicians like a target for these type of lawsuits more so than the average profession? And how does that all work from what you've seen in your experiences?
So I wasn't in this field 30 years ago, but what I'm told is 30 years ago, it was pretty much just physicians setting up Cook Islands Trust. And they'd still occupy a large portion of the number of people who are creating Cook Islands Trust. But the industry has become a bit more fragmented, and other industries now are being targeted with lawsuits, certainly attorneys, architects, but more real estate investors, even cryptocurrency investors, influencers as well. There's a wide variety of people setting up Cook Islands Trust. But if I had to say one profession that stuck out as the most common, it's probably still doctors.
Yeah. So where do they fall when they think about, well, I've got malpractice insurance? Talk about that a little bit.
So as I said, I generally recommend buying the insurance. However, physicians, certainly certain types of surgeons or high-end surgeons, we don't always recommend buying the insurance. Insurance has gotten so ridiculous that sometimes we've seen doctors who are asked to pay something like $100,000 a year in premiums for $200,000 of coverage. At that point, I say, don't even buy the insurance and let's just rely on the asset protection. We've seen times where doctors, they or often a friend of theirs, thought that they had proper insurance, get sued. And again, the insurance company is hesitant to pay or claims that the policy does not cover the particular issue that they are confronted with. And then that's when they come to us. And for the situations where their friend got sued, we can help them a lot. When they've already been sued themselves, we can still have the discussion. We may be able to do something to help mitigate damage, but for real protection, what you want to do is have that insurance as the first line of defense, but then have the safety net of the asset protection and not rely solely on an insurance company's promise to pay out.
Absolutely. So create for our listener like a profile. Like if you're a doctor and you're this, you should consider this. I mean, what is the profile if we had to pull one out?
So the biggest misconception in the asset protection industry is that you need to be super wealthy, that this is only for centimillionaires or billionaires. The reality is most lawsuits are filed against individuals with $2 million or less in assets. So we actually have seen the majority of our clients have a net worth of between about $1 and $10 million in assets. We do have a number of clients whose net worth is slightly below $1 million, and we also have a few clients whose net worth is significantly above 10 million, some into significantly above 10 million, and a few of those even are centimillionaires. But the vast majority of our clients have between about $1 and $10 million in assets.
Yeah. And that's our audience right here. So has there been any mistakes? What do you see for maybe a couple of common mistakes that physicians will make either in this process or before they get to this process? I mean, do you have any stories you could share that way?
Sure. There's one common mistake that we see more often than anything else, and that is simply putting it off, waiting too long to start the process. We get calls from people who are thinking about setting up an asset protection plan, and then 6-9 months go back, they get sued, they call us back up, and we have to tell them some bad news that they waited too long to do what they needed to do to protect their assets. So putting it off is the biggest misconception. Thinking that you don't have enough assets is a common misconception. Working with the wrong provider. There are definitely other very good attorneys at setting up international trust, and there are outright scammers and attorneys who are misleading clients with fabricating or not being honest about how the case law is. There are attorneys who have claimed that setting up an offshore trust is going to cause you to go to jail. This is not true. Now, if you do something else illegal and have an offshore trust, that could end poorly for you. But simply having an offshore trust has never caused anyone to go to jail, or making the mistake of using a domestic trust or some type of trust that is going to move itself in time. That's risky planning. It's not. So to recap, not thinking you have enough money, waiting too long, and not working with the right provider would be the biggest and most common mistakes that I've seen.
So it's not just income driven, it's asset driven too. So if you're a doctor that owns a practice, you've got a real estate, maybe you own your office practice, a couple of rentals. What would that profile look for that doctor? Yes, for an offshore trust, or what?
So you hit a very important point there, which is that the assets are more important than the income, because what we do is we protect assets. Now, there's some ways of protecting income. In particular, if you owe somebody money, if you owe child support, then you can have your wages garnished by a friendly creditor, by someone you prefer to have them garnish your wages. But it's not. But you also want to make sure that the assets are protected, because that's really what a creditor is going to want. That's what a creditor is going to go after. Taking income is less appetizing because, number one, you can only take a certain portion of it. And if somebody's already garnished that, there's nothing left to take. But the assets can remain available, and we don't want to be in a position where somebody is seeing them lose their assets. So that's the most important factor. Someone could have very little or no income, but if they have significant assets, that's where we can step in to help out.
Yeah. A lot of dental practices have partners in a partnership scenario where they own their own practice. They're in a partnership situation. What would a combination partnership look like? What would you say to those kind of doctors?
So asset protection trusts are generally set up for either an individual or a married couple. And so what we would do is set it up so that the individuals each have their own offshore trust, and their trust own an interest in the partnership. So if you and I were in business together, I can set up an offshore trust and own 50% of the partnership. You can own the other 50% of the partnership directly in your name, Kevin, or what you can do is have your share held inside of your own offshore trust. And what we find often is once one of the partners moves their assets into a protected structure, the other partners are quick to do the same.
I gotcha. So could you share with us one of your court cases that you've won, hands down?
We've seen many times where clients got favorable settlements. We had a situation where we actually had a doctor that was concerned about a patient, not any particular patient, but one of the patients coming and bringing a claim against him. So he set up a Cook Islands trust. 2.5 years go by. I get a call from him, and I thought that he was going to tell me that he had a patient sue him, or there was some type of threat coming his way from his practice. And he said that to his surprise, his wife had filed for divorce. And because of the trust, we were able to negotiate a settlement, which I believe was much better than he would have been able to get if he didn't have the trust in place. So this often happens. You plan to protect from one particular liability, but it's something else that comes your way.
Yeah. And I bet he obviously didn't see that coming when he set it up, obviously, but thank God he had the trust.
Correct. Yes, It was life-saving for him.
Tell us a little bit more about the Cook Island Trust. You were about to go there when I interjected several questions for you, so go ahead and continue on that thought process.
So the Cook Islands have been in the asset protection industry longer than anyone else since the mid-1980s. While there's a few dozen or so jurisdictions which will allow the use of an asset protection trust, Cook Islands is our favorite for a number of reasons. They welcome and are glad to work with Americans. They've been in the industry a long time. They have some very good trust companies. It's a very well-regulated country to do business in. I would say in terms of offshore jurisdictions worth considering for an American, you're looking at Cook Islands, Nevis, and Belize. Belize has some great laws in place. However, they also have some issues with the regulators there where it can be a bit slow and a little bit unpredictable. It's just not as safe as a place to do business as the Cook Islands or Nevis. Nevis is a second great option, but their asset protection industry has not been viewed as favorably by the government as the Cook Islands, who has really devoted themselves to protecting the asset protection industry. So it's the reason that I have focused my business on setting up Cook Islands Trust. They're very flexible structures. You can add and remove property from them. You can amend your trust. You can take distributions as you wish. You can invest in anything you can now. They're tax neutral. They're very good structures once people really come to understand all the benefits.
So they're tested and tried and have more experience in that than maybe Belize.
Correct. They've simply had the asset protection industry alive longer than anyone else.
Yeah. Are these revocable or irrevocable trusts, just for our listeners?
So they're technically irrevocable. However, don't let that term scare you. They're very flexible structures. You can add and remove property. You can amend the trust. You can even close the trust as well. The term irrevocable in this context simply means a court can't order our client to break it, but it doesn't mean that the client doesn't. But the client still has all the benefits and flexibility of a revocable trust.
Yeah. This has been great information. So if there's a doctor listening right now thinking, okay, this has been on my mind, but I've just never known who to turn to or what it was all about or taking the time. Well, one of the great things about podcasting, as you know, is that doctors can listen to this at their own time when they have time, because we're all busy that way. But let's say the doctor's listening. It's 10 o'clock at night where he's listening and he's going through this, or she, and this has been on their mind. What should be the next step for them?
Give me a call. We don't charge for initial consultations. Our firm does only asset protection. BlakeHarrisLaw.com. We're on all the major social medias at Blake Harris Law. We've got hundreds of thousands of followers across our various channels, probably more so than any other asset protection attorney. This is the only thing we do. We do everything on a flat fee. We're very transparent with our pricing. Clients know what they're getting into from the very beginning. And as soon as you make that call, you're going to notice a shift. Your assets won't be protected as soon as you make the call. They will have that done pretty soon after, but you're going to notice a shift in your mentality, and things that have worried you are going to stop worrying you because you're actually taking action to protect and fix them.
Clarity from a decision that has been made. This is one thing we always talk about on our podcast too a lot, is the mindset that the doctors need to have to take them to those levels. And I think that's a very important point that you just made. So life on the other side of this decision will just bring back everything you want to do, get you back to the profession that you're in, get you back out on the golf course without having to worry about what's going on because you've taken the time. Man, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour out of your schedule can go a long way to protect your assets and do the things to build wealth inside and outside of your office. But protected at the same time. That's huge. That's very crucial. Do you have any closing remarks or anything you'd like to maybe share open-ended here?
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. When it comes to asset protection planning, a few hours of proper planning can do more to protect your wealth than decades of work in many circumstances. Make sure that you work with a provider who you are comfortable with, who you are confident with them. Do your research. You can learn more about my company at BlakeHarrisLaw.com. You can also avoid certain industry scams with another website I built, which is theoffshorewatchdog.com. And if you have any questions about asset protection, more than happy to speak with anyone one-on-one.
That's great. Thank you for providing that contact information too, because I believe you'll be receiving some calls. This is great. Blake Harris from Blake Harris Law. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for going through this. Now, we just touched on the surface of all of this, but I think it's enough to get them thinking in this right direction, that a few minutes could change your life by doing this. So I want to thank you for being a guest on our podcast today. Thank you so much.
Kevin, thanks for having me.
That's our podcast for today. And remember, if you're not working on your personal wealth, who is? Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Any questions about what you heard today, please send an email to kdsullivan@lpl.com. Physician Wealth Meds, wealth medicine for doctors.